If you're like me, your timelines on just about every social media platform have been hot takes and cold takes about the new Wuthering Heights film by director Emerald Fennell. Following her successful and still discourse-inducing film Saltburn, Wuthering Heights began to incur wrath from the masses far and wide the very instant the cast was revealed, continuing a long tradition of bewildering Wuthering Heights casting decisions. Fennell made the decision to cast white actor Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff and 35-year-old blonde Margot Robbie as Catherine Earnshaw. This was the first impetus for violent online discourse, which we'll get into. Less egregious was Margot as the at most 18 years old Catherine, but the casting woes and misguided takes on Victorian race science that ensued were only the very beginning of the firestorm of discourse surrounding this movie. The minute it began screening, it became very clear this film is not remotely Wuthering Heights as we know it. In fact, I would argue it's not Wuthering Heights at all. Matter of fact, I don't even think that it's good on its own merits, outside of stunning cinematography and set design and costumes. But before you enjoyers click away, hold on a bit and please let me explain why. I sat down in that theater having gotten most of the way through the book, which was fine because this film only covers the first half, sort of, and I wanted to go into it with an open mind. The thing is, I actually love odd and anachronistic creative takes on classic literature. I love Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, which is obviously a big inspiration for Fennell herself. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula and Clueless, which are nothing like the original Dracula or Jane Austen's Emma. Who's to say this wouldn't be similar? The opening scene and title sequence seemed promising, but as the film drew on, and man, it really dragged, I started getting more and more exhausted and frustrated. So did a lot of other people in the theater. When the credits rolled, I listened to dumbfounded silence and then heated, angry debriefs among the groups. One couple walking out with us said, "I can't believe I just sat through 2.5 hours of book talk smut trope slop." And yet, a lot of people are also really enjoying this film, and understandably feel extremely defensive about that in the face of the furious criticism. For days, my timelines have been full of honestly mind-boggling takes like, if you criticize Emerald Fennell, you hate women, and it doesn't matter if she made Heathcliff white, and Wuthering Heights is a love story. No, it is not. Wuthering Heights has, for almost 200 years, been misread as a love story. In reality, it's a revenge story. So I want to take you with me on a detailed analysis for all of the shit that is honestly wrong with this movie and how it connects or doesn't to the book. The problem we'll soon encounter is that nearly nothing about this film connects to the dang book. And yes, I do think that's a serious problem. Come learn with me. So before we get into it, a word from today's sponsor, Hope Trumps Hate. I know things are and have been rough since the beginning of time, and it's only natural for all of us here in the US to start feeling helpless in the face of despair and tyranny. You should of course be doing what you can to make a difference in your communities and building mutual aid and having hard conversations with loved ones. But it's also vital to remember that you can do your best work helping others if you help yourself and regulate your emotions in the face of stress. I really enjoy adult coloring books because as an artist and someone who works a lot, I am often way too tired to try and come up with a really involved project that asks a lot from my brain. The guidance in adult coloring books, like this one called Hope Trumps Hate by Starry Lavender, helps me tackle both problems by letting me be creative with guided pictures and activities. This coloring book has been so fun to doodle through, and obviously its theme is great for helping to work through overwhelming emotions at the state of things by helping me process in a healthy way before I take action, rather than stewing in bad emotions and doom scrolling, which helps nobody. It also makes for a great gift for any friends or family that you know who would enjoy breaking out some markers on this bad boy. The activities switch up from comedic to heartfelt, so you get the full spectrum of what you might need at the moment. Highly recommend. You can grab a copy of Hope Trumps Hate at the link in the description below, and enjoy doodling. Thank you so much to Starry Lavender for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to yelling about Wuthering Heights. Okay, I think anyone who would yell at me reactively in defense of this movie has probably clicked away by now, so I don't have to be nice anymore. This movie is, in my opinion, dog shit. Like, I actually am in disbelief about how bad it was, however bad I thought it was going to be, it wildly exceeded my expectations. While watching it, all I could think of was,
what? A kaleidoscope? I'm not 5 shapes and colors.
Because that is genuinely kind of all it has going for it. So let me explain why. Like, literally as soon as it got to the scene where all of a sudden it's evil Kathy wearing that Dracula dress and like all the lighting is red, I was like, oh, they think we're stupid. Maybe some of us are. Anyway, let's begin as usual with a base of context to work from, because I know many of you might not have read the book or know that much about Emily Brontë, the author. By the way, I only recently discovered that it's pronounced Brontë. Fully believed it was Brontë my entire life. The more you know. So Emily Brontë was born July 30th, 1818 in Thornton, Yorkshire. She was the 5th of 6 children born to her parents, but in the end, only 4 of them lived into adulthood. Branwell, the only son, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne. Of the 3 sisters, Emily was the middle child. All of the Brontë children were avid writers, with Charlotte best known for Jane Eyre, Emily known for her only full book, Wuthering Heights, and Anne known for The Tenant of Windfell Hall. They published under male pseudonyms, Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell. In 1820, when Emily was 2 years old, the family relocated to Haworth, a village among the moors, Bradford, Manchester, and Leeds being its closest major cities. Within a year, their mother Maria passed away, probably of cancer. Shortly after, the eldest Brontë daughters, Maria and Elizabeth, died of consumption, which they caught at the school that they were sent to. Because of this, their father thereafter had the remaining children homeschooled, further isolating them. They became voracious readers and artists and were very isolated and therefore very close. They invented imaginary worlds together and collaborated on stories and poems. Emily had very short stints as a student and a teacher at some schools, but never really liked it and always quickly returned home to Haworth. And then Charlotte and Emily went to school in Brussels, which they also kind of disliked and came off as strange to acquaintances there. Emily especially was maligned for being quiet and awkward and unfashionable. Unfashionable she may have been, but she was also recognized by teachers and peers as being perhaps something of a genius. Emily and Charlotte did so well at school that they were brought on as teachers, but just as the gloom of Emily's personality was beginning to brighten, their Aunt Elizabeth suddenly died, and the sisters rushed home to Haworth. Emily would remain there for the rest of her short life. Emily began writing Wuthering Heights during this time, and it was published under her pseudonym in late 1847, soon after Charlotte published Jane Eyre, which was an instant hit. Sadly, she would not live to see her own story see success. She died only 1 year after its publication on December 19, 1848. She had caught consumption and stubbornly refused to get medical care until it was too late, and by too late I mean literally 2 hours before she died. It's likely she caught it while nursing Branwell, who died of it in September. She was only 30 years old. Emily was a controversial figure in her own time. Many biographers believe that Charlotte was afraid of her and how headstrong she was. She had very little love for people compared to her passion for animals and nature. Some biographers, like Claire Harmon, believe that she might have been autistic. Catherine Frank theorizes she also might have been anorexic. Whatever the case, as these tales about Emily are all just hearsay and we have very little of her own words, and Charlotte is not a reliable narrator, all we have to gain insight into her imagination is her poetry and the literary giant that is Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights had a deeply divided reception by critics, and it largely skewed negative. One critic wondered how anyone could write this thing without trying to attempt suicide only a few paragraphs in. Many of them compared it unfavorably with Charlotte's much more popular Jane Eyre. It would be decades before Wuthering Heights would actually get any in-depth literary analysis, even by the newly formed Brontë Society. Reviewers found it to be too wild, disturbing, and unpleasant. Many claimed it had no proper lesson for readers to be guided by. Honestly, I have no idea how you can possibly not learn any lesson from this book. There also developed a pervasive conspiracy theory that Wuthering Heights was not written by Emily at all, but rather by her troubled brother Branwell, who might have been the inspiration for Heathcliff, an idea that emerged early on in 1867's edition of People's Magazine, when an anonymous author said that a timid and retiring female could never have written such a demonic book. Never mind that Emily was known to be highly intelligent and imaginative, and spent a lot of time reading Byronic poetry and taking long walks in the moors. The Byronic poetry will become relevant later. The theory was helped along by the fact that Branwell's buddies, William Dearden and Francis Grundy, had by that point been spreading the rumor around, claiming that the book read similarly to drafts written by Branwell before his untimely death. Regardless, we have fully disproven the Branwell theory. There's no evidence to support it, and in 2020, digital humanities researchers Rachel McCarthy and James O'Sullivan from University College Cork in Ireland operated an in-depth experiment to try to put this myth to bed once and for all using computer-assisted stylometry. It's an extremely interesting paper. If you're interested in it, I've linked it below. But all of these allegations and the lashings that Wuthering Heights got compared to Jane Eyre didn't happen in a vacuum. Wuthering Heights was deeply shocking to Victorian readers, as many Gothic novels were. Many people preferred domestic novels that encouraged wholesome values with easily digestible plots and characterizations. When it was revealed that Ellis Bell was in fact Emily Brontë, people were gagged that a young woman could have imagined a plot so savage. Charlotte Brontë herself attempted to posthumously feminize and domesticate her sister to try and save her reputation. In her preface to the 1850 reprint of Wuthering Heights, writing, "I am bound to avow that she had scarcely more practical knowledge of the peasantry amongst whom she lived than a nun has of the country people who sometimes pass her convent gates. Circumstances favored and fostered her tendency to seclusion. She rarely crossed the threshold of home. Having formed these beings, the characters of the novel, she did not know what she had done." Charlotte was viewed as the ideal feminine of the sisters compared to Emily's wildness. But don't worry guys, Emily created this story totally on accident. This insistence by Charlotte immediately led in part to the questioning of the book's authorship, despite Charlotte herself insisting that Emily really did write it. It kind of backfired. She had good intentions, but the novel was still insensible to many readers, regardless of who really wrote it. So for the uninitiated here who may have only seen the new movie, or even any of the other film adaptations, what exactly happens in this book? Spoiler alert for a 178-year-old book. The story begins with this dude named Lockwood heading up to his spooky landlord Heathcliff's even spookier house called Wuthering Heights. He meets some odd characters there, including some blonde chick named Kathy Heathcliff, a weird boy named Hareton Earnshaw, an incomprehensible old man named Joseph, and Zilla, the housekeeper. No one is hospitable in the slightest, and he has to stay the night for some reason, even though they really don't want him to, and it is in that darkness he is awoken by a literal ghost outside the window. Okay, so now we're up to 2 Kathys. Lockwood is so scared, and then Heathcliff barges in. Upon hearing about the ghost, he's like, oh yeah, that's fucking Kathy, she's always doing that. So when Lockwood goes home, he asks his nosy housekeeper, Nellie Dean, what the hell is up with Wuthering Heights? And thus, Nellie launches into a long story that is going to be really hard for me to paraphrase. Basically, Catherine Earnshaw, the ghost one that is, was the daughter of the Heights' original owner. He also had a shit-ass son named Hindley. One day, Mr. Earnshaw returns home from a jaunt to Liverpool, a well-known prominent slave trading port, with strange cargo in tow. A mysterious, dark-skinned, black-haired boy who doesn't speak English. The young boy is described as, quote, a gypsy in aspect, but no one is quite sure what he is other than that he makes everyone really uncomfortable. Hindley decides that the boy is going to be his new punching bag, but Catherine decides he is now her pet and names him Heathcliff. Heathcliff's poor treatment thereafter and his mysterious origins mean that he slowly develops a poor attitude and some anger issues, but he and Kathy are thick as thieves, spending every waking moment together. After all, Kathy has a bad attitude too. They have a lot in common. One day, while playing in the moors, they come upon the nearby Thrushcross Grange and spot its owner's children, the absurdly blonde and blue-eyed Edgar and Isabella Linton. Their bulldog attacks Kathy, who is entreated to stay at the Grange until she recovers, but Heathcliff is treated with utter disgust and shooed away after Mr. Linton insinuates that they should hang him. Kathy returns to the Heights Heights 5 weeks later, now a fashionable young lady, accustomed to dainties and luxury and being treated like a princess. And Heathcliff, well, he's still kind of stinky, I guess? I don't know, he spends a lot of time in the barn. Heathcliff and Cathy are still obsessed with each other though, but there's now a rift between the two because Cathy has feelings for Edgar. When he proposes, she accepts, but she's very torn. In wailing her feelings to Nellie, who is really sick of everyone's shit already, she doesn't realize that Heathcliff is listening at the door and declares that it would degrade her to marry him, but that marrying Edgar could enable her to help Heathcliff rise in the world in obtaining Edgar's riches. But Heathcliff has heard enough and flees Wuthering Heights, not to be seen for 3 years. So Cathy marries Edgar and is pretty happy until one day, who is this handsome, upright, not stinky man? Why, it's Heathcliff, back from whatever the hell he's been doing, and now he's rich and a gentleman too. Also, at some point during all of this, Hindley shows back up with a wife and they have a son named Hareton, and the wife dies and Hindley becomes an alcoholic and more violent than ever, and there's a whole thing where he drops Hareton over the banister of the balcony inside the house, and Heathcliff catches the baby on accident and is so pissed because honestly he wants the baby dead, and also Hindley dead. It's just like that Kate Beaton comic. So Heathcliff starts making the moves on Cathy again, but like, Cathy is happily married, and she honestly thinks that she can have Edgar and Heathcliff, like a proto-open marriage, and there shouldn't be a problem, right? Well, it's definitely a problem for everyone else involved, and Heathcliff gets the picture that he can't truly have Cathy, so he woos Edgar's sister Isabella and runs off with her, and they elope. And he hangs Isabella's dog. So everyone starts realizing that maybe this guy is kind of a wacko, and we should probably be careful of him. Heathcliff and Isabella abscond to the Heights, where Isabella is abused and horribly tormented by everyone there, but especially by Hindley and Heathcliff. Realizing that she's in mortal danger and was being used by Heathcliff in his grand plan of revenge, Isabella flees the Heights and heads south to safety, where she soon gives birth to Linton Heathcliff. Yes, I know, the fucking names in this book are ridiculous. It's really hard to keep track of them. Linton Heathcliff is Heathcliff and Isabella's son. Edgar Linton is Cathy's husband. So soon after this, Cathy, Heathcliff, and Edgar have a huge fight, and Cathy falls into a depressive episode. She gives birth to her and Edgar's daughter, Catherine Linton. Another name to keep track of. Don't get little Cathy and big Cathy mixed up. Only one of them is alive at a time. Cathy dies immediately after birth, and Heathcliff is beside himself with grief, commanding Cathy's ghost to haunt him always. Anyway, 12 or so years go by and Isabella dies, so Edgar goes and fetches the sickly and peevish Linton, who looks nothing like his father. In fact, he's even blonder than Edgar and Isabella were. He and little Cathy hit it off right away. You're gonna have to really ignore a lot of incest in this story. Sorry. But Heathcliff whisks his son away to the Heights. Cathy and Linton keep up letter correspondence though, which is heavily encouraged by Heathcliff for some reason. Actually, he really openly wants Cathy and Linton to marry. Why? No clue yet, but I assure you, it's for spooky reasons. Oh yeah, and also Hindley drank himself to death at some point a while back, but it's possible Heathcliff killed him. It's unclear. So now Heathcliff is the official owner of Wuthering Heights, and he's abusing his son and Hareton, and Linton's health really sucks and he's like kind of annoying in general, but Cathy still loves him. She secretly visits despite Edgar's protests, until one day years later, Heathcliff succeeds in locking her and Nellie in Wuthering Heights, imprisoning them, and resolving to hold them there until Cathy marries Linton. And Cathy freaks out because her father has been sick. What if he dies while she's away? She miserably agrees and is thus trapped under Heathcliff's power. Edgar dies, Cathy lives at Wuthering Heights in misery, and then soon enough, Linton dies. And by some kind of legal hoopla, now Heathcliff owns the Grange too. He has finally succeeded in his revenge against all who wronged him. He's the owner of both properties, his enemies are dead. Why is he not happy? He continues abusing Hareton and Cathy, but despite the odds, the two start to get close. Cathy had been bullying Hareton for being illiterate and ungentlemanly, but eventually realizes that she's been harsh and starts teaching him to read and properly speak. And all of the while, Heathcliff is wasting away. He spends long stretches of time on the moors, tormented by Cathy Earnshaw's ghost. He becomes unable to eat or sleep, and one day he finally dies, reunited with Catherine at last. With his death, Cathy the Younger and Hareton are freed of their abuse, which they were already standing up to, and the two plan to be married. Lockwood goes and visits the graves of Catherine, Heathcliff, and Edgar, and feels sure that their souls are at rest. Wuthering Heights didn't just unsettle Victorian readers, it unsettles modern ones too. I started noticing in the last several months a lot of videos like this one.
I start reading Wuthering Heights for the first time in over a decade, and I find myself having to pause and reread far more than I've ever had to before. Now, I read quite regularly, and I was finding myself taking pause because I didn't remember this being such a struggle to read when I was at school.
I recently read Wuthering Heights, and I felt like the dumbest person while reading this. And this is coming from someone that used to read classic literature for fun. I've been primarily reading like romance, fantasy, thrillers, all the genres except for classic literature. And I was like, I'm gonna go back to it because the movie comes out. I literally was sitting there like, am I really this stupid, or is this a really hard book to read? And I need someone to tell me I'm not alone in this.
There are a few interconnecting issues happening here. For one, no, you're not crazy. Wuthering Heights is a notably difficult narrative, not just due to the wacky family trees. This is a long-studied issue. I think of Emily Ranadozier's essay, Wuthering Heights and 19th Century Literary History, which does get into this. Wuthering Heights is a book that does not blatantly tell you what the theme is, or the meaning behind anything at all. So all of the responsibility for explanation is thrown at the reader's feet, which is why we've had a bazillion years of people interpreting the book in numerous ways, often incorrectly, which is a particularly potent struggle right now with media literacy at an all-time low. Renadozier writes, "We are, as always, left at the end of the novel wondering what happened and what it all meant, if anything. This bafflement, this frustration, can be seen as the source of the novel's continuing interest. You're not stupid for finding Wuthering Heights difficult to digest or wrap your head around. This is a long-standing issue with its narrative, combined with the fact that most readers today, that is, people who still actually fucking read, are no longer accustomed to the prose of the classics, even if they read it before in school, compared to the simpler and more direct structures of modern novels. But I think you'll find if you keep pushing through it, your brain reconnects those neural pathways again. It really does get easier." I think this sort of feeds into the other big discourse du jour, which is, do writers need to read? And in fact, is it ableist and classist to expect writers to read? I'm sorry. I feel very, very strongly about this. Yes, you need to fucking read. Even if you aren't a writer, but especially if you are. Why should I care about what you write if you don't care to read? You clearly don't even like the thing you're making. And no, that is not an ableist or classist take. Personally, I think it's more ableist or classist to say that disabled and poor people simply shouldn't be expected to read. Nuance, 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 obviously, but literature has never, in the history of the world, ever been more accessible than it is now. From online databases of free books like Project Gutenberg, to literally your local library, to the little free libraries, to book trades, to yard sales, to pay what you can book initiatives, you can access books. And you must. And I don't really want to hear, "I don't have time to read," from people who spend all day scrolling social media or gaming. You do have time to read. In fact, you are reading. It's just that you're reading like tweets about shit like how people think Mudeng the hippo is a Republican and Panchikun the monkey is a leftist underdog. Like Twitter user Ben Sixsmith said, "Yes, it's hard to find the time, but the real problem is the time we waste online. There's no excuse for my having never read War and Peace, yet knowing who Clavicular is." In past generations, before the rise of social media, even the working poor were frequently much more well-read than many of us are today. The difference is that today we have the cursed glowing demonic box that we carry everywhere that houses the bad opinions of millions of people we are addicted to being mad at, me included. And yeah, scrolling on my cursed demon box for 30 hours a day makes it really hard to decide to pick up a book instead, because one of them hits my dopamine receptors, which is a lot more fun than the thing that helps my brain not develop early onset dementia. In a world where we're actually arguing over if authors need to read books, it makes sense that the audience themselves are primed for what has now been dubbed smooth-brained Wuthering Heights. Frankly, I don't think we need smooth-brained anything. Because Wuthering Heights has long been read as impenetrable, the most common reading of it has become that of a tragic or toxic romance. Hence why most adaptations focus fully on the love story between Cathy and Heathcliff and fully omit the second half. It makes the story much easier to understand that way, doesn't it? And if you say otherwise, you're an elitist and a misogynist, because actually, it's very progressive and pro-woman for Fennell to create a sexy, hot smut flick for women.
My point is the insane double standard of everyone ripping Emerald Fennell to shreds for not making an accurate adaptation of Wuthering Heights, which she said directly she was going to do. But male directors are messing up source material all the time, and you guys have not said anything about that. God forbid a woman wants to have a little fun in the director's chair.
This is such a potent indication of how insular our algorithms can be. Apparently we all have amnesia. Only a few months ago, when Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein came out, almost my entire timeline was people hating on this movie and calling it Marvel slop. But also, me, like many of us, are old enough to remember when Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby came out and caused its own shitstorm. Male directors aren't making these adaptations and then never getting any criticism. It is true, though, that a lot of them get more awards, they get lauded more, but this argument that nobody is getting on male directors' cases and only going after Emerald Fennell because she's a woman just really doesn't hold water.
Because Emerald Fennell is a woman, and she's making her own Wuthering Heights, and she said it's specifically the Wuthering Heights that she imagined when she read it at 14 years old, and she interpreted it as a love story, so obviously Cathy is her self-insert, cast with Margot Robbie as the Fennell stand-in, and Jacob Elordi as the Heathcliff that she imagined, who is literally a white 1980s bodice ripper cover male lead. Because this is a self-insert fantasy, you know, and therefore Heathcliff must be white, because that's who's sexy and desirable, right? Uh-oh. As soon as the Wuthering Heights casting dropped, the discourse began. It doesn't matter if Heathcliff is cast as white. In fact, was he even non-white in the book in the first place? As stupid as that discourse is, and I think the answers are obvious, let's cover it. Yes, Heathcliff is non-white. We don't know in particular what he is, because that specificity doesn't matter. He's described most frequently as a gypsy, so it is largely possible that he was Romani. That's the interpretation that I personally go with. However, the rural dwellers of the Yorkshire moors in the 1770s or so did not have such a discriminating eye, and would often assume that any brown person might be, quote, a gypsy. There was not an insignificant population of brown and black people floating around England at the time. Liverpool, where Mr. Earnshaw picked up Heathcliff, was a major slave trading port and also a highly populated city for Roma, and Liverpool is comparatively not that far from Haworth, the general vicinity where the book takes place. What we do know for certain is that he is not white, and he is probably not black, at least not fully. Nellie Dean says this when she tells him, "A good heart will help you to a bonny face, my lad," I continued, "if you were a regular black, and a bad one will turn the bonniest into something worse than ugly." In this era, the descriptor black did not directly transliterate to the modern sense of the racial word black. It's true that sometimes dudes who just had a tan were described as black, or people with really dark hair. But in using the specific phrase, "if you were a regular black," Nellie implies that Heathcliff seemingly does not have African ancestry, or at least is mixed. Adding to the possibility of him being Romani, Isabella Linton exclaims upon first seeing him, "Put him in the cellar, papa! He's exactly like the son of the fortune teller that stole my tame pheasant."
And Mr. Linton has a kind of similar notion, saying,
"Oh, I declare he is that strange acquisition my late neighbor made in his journey to Liverpool, a little Lascar, or an American or Spanish castaway." A Lascar being a Southeast or South Asian sailor or something of that nature. Then later on, when trying to console Heathcliff and convince him to tolerate Hindley's abuse, Nellie says to him, "Who knows but your father was Emperor of China, and your mother an Indian queen, each of them able to buy up, with 1 week's income, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange together." Some online discoursers argued that Heathcliff could still be Italian or Spanish, having black hair and darker skin, and be considered non-white by the Victorian English. But this argument falls apart when you remember the author. Heathcliff was babbling a language that no one could pinpoint, even rural English people, but especially Emily Brontë, who would have still been able to at least somewhat recognize Italian or Spanish. Nearly all historians and Brontë scholars agree on Heathcliff's being nondescriptly brown, likely Romani, and his brownness is the central facet of his character. It's the impetus for everything that happens to him and everything he does, because the white characters are terrified of being somehow changed by him, by his darkness infiltrating a pure white civilization. What we don't know for certain either is whether or not Heathcliff might be the illegitimate child of Mr. Earnshaw, making him Cathy's half-brother. This idea has been going around a lot, but it is never expressed in the novel, more so just mused upon by readers and scholars, because why the fuck would Mr. Earnshaw bring home this random starving dirty boy? It's extremely odd, but Wuthering Heights experts like Paul Thompson point out that given the timeline and logistics, Heathcliff being Mr. Earnshaw's son doesn't really make sense. Don't worry though, we've got plenty of incest going on later. Incest for miles, incest as far as the eye can see. Race is absolutely central to Heathcliff's struggle because it reflects late 18th and early 19th century anxieties surrounding racial intermixing in a colonial world, as well as the sunsetting of slavery in Britain. There were deep-set fears about revenge coming from wronged brown and black people. Heathcliff is implied to be a child refugee of British colonialism, given that he was wandering the Liverpool port alone. Susan Meyer calls this the repeated motif of Heathcliff's cannibalism being yet another image of being subjected to reverse colonization, of being invaded and used by another. Heathcliff's appearance in the family at Wuthering Heights, and by extension his preferential treatment by Mr. Earnshaw, earns him incredible abuse at the hands of Hindley, the eldest righteous white son. He is repeatedly beaten and othered, literally flogged as if he were a slave, treated as no more than a servant and a stable boy, unfit for polite society. Hindley even tells Joseph to keep Heathcliff in the attic or the stables. This treatment extends to the Lintons too, who are affronted by Heathcliff's very presence at their house. After Cathy's stay at the Grange, solidifying her ideas about English gentility, she clashes more with Heathcliff until she finally gets engaged to the comparatively very blonde and pale Edgar. Heathcliff realizes he cannot possess the affections of his childhood sweetheart. He has had so much taken from him, his dignity, his pride, and now Cathy. He leaves and makes his fortune somehow, possibly by joining the slave trade as indicated by his later behavior and remarks, and returns to Wuthering Heights, now rich, but still very unwelcomed. No amount of money can make him white. Heathcliff didn't just run off to gain his fortune in order to try and steal Cathy back. He made his fortune in order to enact a grand scheme of revenge against his abusers, Hindley, Edgar, Joseph, even Cathy to some extent for leaving him. This is not a love story. It's a cautionary tale about abuse, obsession, generational trauma, hatred, and otherness. Cathy and Heathcliff's fixation with each other is interesting as a sort of narcissistic cannibalism of identity. When talking to Nellie about her engagement to Edgar, Cathy cries, "He's more myself than I am. Whatever souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Nellie, I am Heathcliff. He's always, always in my mind. Not as a pleasure, any more than I am always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being." The drama of it all isn't coming from nowhere. Emily Brontë was a Lord Byron fangirl. Yes, here comes Lord Byron again, you really can't escape him. And her villainous Heathcliff is actually a pretty on-the-nose Byronic hero. Melodramatic, violent, he even unearths Cathy's grave twice. What many don't know is that, funnily enough, Wuthering Heights is sort of Lord Byron fanfic in that its plot is transplanted from the Byron poem The Dream from 1816. I had no idea about this. I learned it from the ever-fantastic Dr. Kate Lister, so I'll let her take it away dissecting the poem.
So it's a story about how these two young people have grown up together. They're like brother and sister, but they're not brother and sister. And in his dream, he finds out that actually she's going to marry somebody else, despite the fact that she loves this person who is very much like her and like a brother, but not a brother. And he dreams that the young boy runs away and that the young girl marries somebody else. And he describes how eventually the boy comes back to this crumbling old ruin that they both grew up in together. That the boy has changed so much now he's an adult. Look at him. He's wild, he's fiery, his soul has drunk sunbeams, etc. He's just basically become dark and moody and eaten up with revenge and thoughts of hatred and jealousy. And sound familiar? Does this sound familiar? And what we get is a description about how the young girl, that eventually she dies because she becomes so unwell with heartbreak, basically. That's Cathy. That's Cathy. And this is the closing stanza. He was a mark for blight and desolate's compassion round with hatred and contention. Pain was mixed in all that was served up to him until, like the Platonic monarchs of old days, he fed on poison. They had no power. It's Heathcliff. My dream is past. It had no further change. It was of a strange order, and the doom of these two creatures should be thus traced out, almost like a reality, the one to end in madness, both in misery. And is basically the bare bones of Wuthering Heights, isn't it?
And there are so many direct Byron influences in Emily's work, many of which were picked through back in 1939 in Helen Brown's essay, The Influence of Byron on Emily Brontë. So, supplanting the archetype of the volatile, passionate Byronic hero onto Heathcliff, an abused and traumatized non-white boy, having his identity wholly and toxically intertwined with the white girl of his childhood, is such a fascinating and multifaceted take on this, by that time, already well-established trope. Heathcliff, having suffered such intense racialized torture, has understandable reasons for why he becomes so evil. You can sympathize with him, but you can't excuse him. The point is the microscope that this novel places over prejudice and fear, and the toll that it takes intergenerationally. On the topic of race, the two antagonists of this movie, the only two people of color, Edgar in particular is portrayed as a feckless but loving cuck who can't pleasure his wife sexually because she yearns too much for Jacob Elordi. He designs Cathy's bedroom to be a padded cell of her own skin and blonde hair because it's his favorite color. The heavy-handed motifs of the Grange being a prison for movie Cathy, although that is a theme in the book, is just really on the nose with no subtlety at all. Cathy is dressed in lavish, cartoonish gowns, wearing gaudy and enormous bejeweled necklaces like collars. The minute she moves in, a Charlie XCX number singing about how she feels like a prisoner starts blasting, and I actually laughed out loud in the theater because the literalness of it all was so much like those Netflix dating shows where they start playing pop songs that blatantly describe the thing that is currently happening. Nellie, on the other hand, is made out to be the singular villain of the story, the single person keeping our two sexy white leads apart. I'm not upset about Nellie being a villain. Nellie in the book is a villain. She meddles to the detriment of her employers. She personally did abuse Heathcliff some. She directly contributes to Cathy's death and little Cathy's forced marriage. Nellie Dean, as much as she helps keep the cast in check and acts as a voice of reason, is also still a villain. But she is not the only villain. every character in this story is, in a way, and that's a vital aspect of the tale. So Fennell's choices here are just dumbfounding.
Don't even get me started about the poster famously harkening back to Gone with the Wind, yet another very racist movie, and including some scenes from the movie that are also harkening back to Gone with the Wind. You love to see yet another misleading and bad corset scene.
But even more dumbfounding was what she fucking did to Isabella. The women in Wuthering Heights are especially radical for their time. They dare to try to control their own destinies, they refuse inherent domesticity, they reject abuse from the men in their lives, even if they too are abusive. Listen, women's wrongs and all that. This reflects a great deal of contemporary issues that were happening in the 1840s with numerous British women's progressive and labor movements. Abby L. Corey writes in Out of My Brother's Power, Wuthering Heights participates in the socio-political upheavals of the era. It depicts a community, the locality of Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, and many of its people, that is a microcosm of rebellion, a realm in which uprisings against figures in positions of power regularly occur, where the subordinate do not remain in their places, and where dominant modes of power are disparaged. This community thus represents many of the attitudes and actions of the 1840s radical movements on a smaller, more personal scale. Isabella Linton is by far the most revolutionary character in the entire book. She is swept off her feet by Heathcliff, whisked off to elope, unaware she's being used as his tool of revenge. And then she's imprisoned in Wuthering Heights, attacked, battered, threatened with murder, most likely raped, and emotionally berated. Despite all of this, she has the strength within herself to flee Wuthering Heights on foot, several months pregnant, with nothing to her name, through the moors, and find safety in the south, where she raises her son in relative peace. She's an extraordinary character for the time, a woman who recognizes that she is in an abusive relationship without excusing it and manages to free herself from its clutches. And then in the movie, well, Emerald Fennell has done the most hideous, insulting bullshit to this character. We first see Isabella in the Thrushcross Grange garden, waxing poetic about Romeo and Juliet, Fennell's blatant attempt to get us to relate this story to Romeo and Juliet, and later when Heathcliff reappears at the Grange, she becomes obsessed with him. Heathcliff, after having a fight with Cathy, climbs into Isabella's room, strips her naked, and asks her consent to being used sexually in his revenge plot against Cathy, during which he will never love her. Can't be having our heartthrob Heathcliff doing anything untoward, after all. The characters keep calling him a brute and violent, but of course he never does anything to actually indicate that, lest we ever feel bad for finding him sexy. Anyway, Isabella consents to this, they run off together, and he does not hang her dog as a wedding present because, again, he does not do any evil stuff. Why would he? And then he keeps her at Wuthering Heights doing consensual puppy play, where she has a dog collar and chain on, and don't worry guys, she likes it, and she doesn't want to go home, and in fact she's helping Heathcliff write letters to Cathy. She's in on the scheme. She likes it. She likes it. And at the end of the movie, she's screaming and crying as she's being dragged away from Wuthering Heights because she doesn't want to leave. Do you see the problem here? Why do I need to explain why this is a blatantly misogynistic creative decision? But for some reason, I do. Because people are out here saying that this is feminist, actually, because it's giving Isabella agency. Bitch, she already had agency. She frees herself from abuse. She is a triumphant character. Like, literally, how dare you?
And another thing, people are saying that it's a feminist decision to have Cathy and Heathcliff actually consummate their relationship and have sex all over the place because it's allowing Cathy to finally get the object of her desires and encouraging women's sexuality and all that. I would argue that is literally not even true in this movie. It's not actually applauding Cathy for expressing her sexuality. She dies at the very end. The final shot is so blatantly like insinuating this symbolism of her being punished for her sexuality. The final shot is her bleeding out a river of blood from her vagina. She dies at the end. She doesn't get her happy ending. I don't understand where this argument is coming from.
Taking an abuse victim and making her a loveless BDSM puppy girl is such an insane decision that it actually made me want to leave the theater. This is a story about breaking the cycle of abuse. Of course, most adaptations erase Kathy Linton and Hareton Earnshaw, so we never actually get to see the abuse cycles getting broken. It's not a deadly thing to do to a Wuthering Heights adaptation, but it is disappointing. Like a lot of people have said, Wuthering Heights would probably fare better as a miniseries or a TV show. It just doesn't work well with what a movie structure often needs to be. Another thing that often is removed is the viewer as a character, looking in on the abuse, because Lockwood, as Fennell states, is not necessary or boring.
Biggest question is, why in that case does Wuthering Heights feel so soulless? Why does it feel like a pretty carcass of a film? It is because she is Lockwood. He says no one wants Lockwood on the screen, and that's because it was behind the camera. Emily Brontë made Lockwood a parody of a hero. He's the gentry class who think they understand everything that's going on, but lack the ability to empathize with the characters that they're connecting to. He was more enthralled with the aesthetic of Thrushcross Grange, Wuthering Heights, Cathy Jr., than he was with what was actually going on. A voyeur will always be detached. They will never have anything of substance to say. Fennell is astute enough to realize that in a society where we are bankrupt of intimacy, selling the aesthetic of love is the intelligent thing to do.
Removing Lockwood is a choice that I don't personally stand behind because I view it as similar to if you removed Nick from The Great Gatsby or Walton from Frankenstein. Lockwood is our everyman. He stands in for us, the reader, allowing someone within the tale to say, all of this shit happening is bonkers. Does anyone else think this is bonkers? Because he has no skin in the game. It assures us of the character's madness and mania. Similarly, in The Great Gatsby, Nick discovers and plays observer to the grim and manic tale of Gatsby and Daisy, and the doom that follows their obsession. In Frankenstein, Walton exists to let Victor take us through his tale of woe before his death, and also to further the story's core themes. They lead us through the story, and likewise, without Lockwood, Nellie has no one to tell her story to. The Matryoshka-style narrative of a tale being told to a bewildered outsider who briefly witnesses the story's after-horror firsthand is a core facet of Gothic and Victorian at large literature, because it harkens to the core themes of these stories being, essentially, ghost stories rooted in old wives' tales, myths, and legends, told since ancient times in the form of hushed verbal stories by a fire, passed down for generations. This structure doesn't exist for no reason. It's meant to take you away from the lonely, singular experience of reading a book and bringing you into the long-established oral traditions of old. You are Walton. You are Lockwood. That is not to say that Lockwood is a neutral character, though. He isn't. Emily Brontë wrote him almost as a caricature of the English gentry / middle class in their estranged views of the Yorkshire middle and lower classes. But that's why he's such a good vessel for the reader. Most of us reading Wuthering Heights today are just like Lockwood, removed, an outsider to the insular workings of this isolated world. A story like Wuthering Heights really benefits from this type of character because they act as a grounding force against all of the insane abuse that happens. Even though Lockwood himself is also sort of bonkers with the way he's sniffing around little Cathy and the way that he deliberately injures Ghost Cathy, although don't ask me why a ghost can bleed. Don't ask me why he was able to do that. I don't know. But even Nellie can't play the everyman role. She was honestly an active participant in some of the abuse or the enabling of it, even if she also did call it out. So with Lockwood, we are given a chance to be reminded that these characters aren't existing in a vacuous netherworld. Many of the things in the book did and do happen in real life. Shedding a light on it and learning to overcome it is the point. Emerald Fennell's film, by erasing the original plot in favor of a somewhat steamy, cheating plot to appeal to the ACOTAR crowd, has removed what makes Wuthering Heights so powerful and so ageless. She so desperately wants to have something to say, to be a provocateur, but then you come out of her films sort of just feeling like she might hate women and poor people. What on earth is this movie trying to say? Fennell has no follow-through, no deliverance of any of her promises. It wasn't particularly freaky, all the sex scenes and montages were fully clothed with very little chemistry. it wasn't really romantic either, not even in a toxic way. With the character's central struggles stripped away, there's nothing logically keeping Cathy and Heathcliff apart. He's not even evil, he's just some dude. And they consummate their relationship regardless, so now they're both bad people in an annoying way rather than a cautionary way that is meant to teach us a lesson. The film morosely ends with Cathy's death and miscarriage almost insultingly stealing the final shot from the infinitely better film Nosferatu, and has her miscarry little Cathy, so we never need to trifle with the next generation who breaks the cycle of abuse. A film's gorgeous cinematography, fun set design and costuming and fun music can't save it from the death knell of a horrible script. And it's extra annoying too, because Emerald, you're adapting a book. The script is right there. By rending the story limb from limb in order to make a smooth-brained, sexy, dark romance adaptation, the result is a hollow and ideologically confused slog with no emotional courage. And the reviews are feeling the pain too.
We should hold women to high standards too. And if your feminism is not intersectional, it's useless to me. She is classist and racist through her artwork.
Take Isabella, chained like a dog, panting, barking. As far as symbolism, of course, she's a pawn to Heathcliff in this film, whether or not she consents to it. And this seems to allude to when Heathcliff killed Isabella's dog in the novel, which doesn't happen in the film, because Heathcliff needs to function as a romantic hero. We can't have this guy killing dogs. We won't want him to end up with Cathy if he's killing dogs.
I don't know how I didn't mention this before, but when I went back to the text to look for the quote about hanging the dog, in that same chapter, Heathcliff says regarding Isabella eloping with him, she abandoned them under a delusion, picturing in me a hero of romance and expecting unlimited indulgences for my chivalrous devotion. So Heathcliff did not want to be a romantic hero. Emily Brontë made sure to let us know directly he's not a romantic hero. So it's interesting seeing him turned into one.
Clarice Loffrey wrote in The Independent, Wuthering Heights uses the guise of interpretation to gut one of the most impassioned, emotionally violent novels ever written, and then toss its flayed skin over whatever romance tropes seem most marketable. Eleanor Penny wrote on her Substack, the further you get into the 2-hour-plus runtime, the more you're left wondering when in the filmmaking process these quotation marks around the title were added. They feel more than a little defensive, like they're getting out ahead of negative press from spoil sports who want their Brontë to involve maybe less licking the walls, maybe something more substantial than one of those TikTok cooking videos where well-tooled young men find innovative new ways to disrespect a loaf of bread. Katie Tobin writes for the Tribune magazine, in future films, Fennell would do better to stray from class politics and focus on what she knows best, revenge, debasement, and transgression, if substantiated by more than just glittering empty provocation. Sam Bodrogen writes on Substack, the idea that Cathy and Heathcliff's bond is so strong that it ruins their family beyond any one bloodline, haunts their children from beyond the grave, is terrifying and disturbed. Fennell takes the deviant erotics inherent to the text and files them down until they are little more than, what if a hot guy was at your house? So this movie is certainly not a good adaptation, and maybe not even a good movie, though I will admit that is subjective. Many people simply decide a movie is good if they thought it was entertaining enough or looked pretty, in which case this movie may have sated that hunger. But for the rest of us, what truly will do it? Me personally, I think the most perfect adaptation is Cliff Richard's Heathcliff musical, which has some of the most bewildering yet earnest creative decisions I have ever seen. It does have Whitecliff, though.
I forgive what you have done to me, Cathy, and I will bear my banishment alone. I swear I will see you again if I shall live, and exact my revenge upon those who hate me.
I wish this thing existed on DVD. It has haunted me for days, much like Cathy's ghost does to Heathcliff for 20 years.
I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul.
Funnily enough, the creator of the Reader's Guide to Wuthering Heights website, Paul Thompson, actually wrote a short essay back in 2009 on what he believed would make a good Wuthering Heights adaptation. He wrote, "What they fail to realize is that Wuthering Heights is really a story of revenge. It is the story of Heathcliff, who rises as Mr. Earnshaw's favorite, then falls under Hindley, loses the love of his life to another man, runs away to better himself, and then spends the rest of the book plotting his vengeance on the two families who, in his mind, mistreated him. If you think of that as the theme, then the story takes a completely different turn. From the minute the film's tagline, 'the greatest love story of all time,' was revealed, it became apparent that Fennell had failed step one of making a good adaptation. Understand what the source material is about." Well, scratch that. I think she understands what it's about. She's not a stupid person. She's not even technically a bad artist. I think she has a beautiful vision. She is a very well-educated lady. I think she has deliberately decided to either misunderstand the themes or ignore them in favor of her version of events. She has made it clear that she wants Wuthering Heights to be a love story, but Wuthering Heights is not in any way a love story. It is a cautionary tale about abuse that has love in it as a tool. It seems the actors don't, or at least didn't, know what the damn book is about either. Margot Robbie admitted that she hadn't read the book.
But I'm glad that my first version of it was Emerald's script.
And then Jacob Elordi bewilderingly said in an interview that your Heathcliff will find you. Good Lord, protect us all from any Heathcliff finding us. That is a threat. One of, I think, the most accurate takes on Wuthering Heights' meaning comes from Georges Bataille. He writes in his essay, Emily Brontë, "Wuthering Heights does in fact raise the question of evil with regard to passion, as if evil were the most powerful means of exposing passion. The subject of the book is the revolt of a man accursed, whom fate has banished from his kingdom, and who will stop at nothing to regain it. The lesson of Wuthering Heights, of Greek tragedy, and ultimately of all religions, is that there is an instinctive tendency towards divine intoxication which the rational world of calculation cannot bear. The bare minimum ask of understanding and respecting what your source material is about and trying to say doesn't mean you don't have creative license to go wild with your adaptation. Plenty of adaptations have done it successfully. Many of them also build themselves under new names to emphasize their individuality compared to the source material, like Clueless, like Bridget Jones's Diary. Had Emerald Fennell not just used the title Wuthering Heights, it's likely that people would be much less angry.
Actually, I can think of a really good example of an upcoming film that is adapting a classic piece of Gothic literature and really taking a departure from the source material, and I think doing it very intelligently and not using the same title as its source material because it knows it's its own thing. And that is The Bride by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Obviously, this movie is not out yet. I've just seen the trailer, but I'm already really excited about this movie because it looks so fun and so creative. This is another film by a visionary female director that is doing what Emerald Fennell thinks she wants to do. Because The Bride is billing itself under its own name, since the trailer came out, it's already not experiencing even remotely the same amount of vitriol and comparison as Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. So, case closed on that theory, I guess.
And for that matter, you can make an adaptation with the same title and change a bunch of things and make most of the audience very happy because it's clear that you understand and are adding something in dialogue with the original. Case in point, the new Interview with the Vampire TV show, which I think is one of the most perfect examples of doing this successfully. It's not that people, including myself, are book purists who want a one-to-one adaptation of the book. That's not possible with cinema. That's boring also, after all. Is it too much of an ask for the adaptation to be good, though? For the changes it makes to actually add something meaningful to the original, to converse with it? This movie seems to resent being asked to have a conversation at all. It doesn't want us to have to think too hard.
I think people are very open to artistic interpretation of classics. However, by cutting out race from the story, you're not just doing your own artistic interpretation, you are betraying the spirit of the story, the essence, the core of the story.
Whether or not adaptations of literary source material have to be loyal to the original text, and if not, why not? Firstly, like invariably, when you're transposing a story from a book to a movie, changes are going to have to be made. A movie is not like an audiobook. Dialogue will have to be cut, scenes changed, that is inevitable. In fact, some of the best adaptations of classic literature change the story entirely. Think of Clueless, which is an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma. It's set in 1990s Los Angeles. However, it retains the spirit and humour and essential narrative that makes Emma so great and so funny. So fidelity is not the metric by which we should measure the value of an adaptation. The real question isn't whether a film follows the plot or is set in the same setting, but whether it understands what the original work is trying to say. What is Wuthering Heights trying to say? Well, it's bleak, hateful, violent, tragic. There's no sexual denouement. There is no sex in Wuthering Heights. It's gothic. It has framed narratives. And the one thing it is not is a love story. And that is not what this film gave us. The director is, of course, entirely within their rights to adapt a text however they want. But in my view, great adaptation is about remaining loyal to the philosophical heart of a work. I'm afraid that requires the director to understand what the work is actually saying in the first place.
An adaptation of a book will always be beholden to its source material. If you don't want people to make comparisons to the book, then grow a spine and just make an original work rather than trying to take the easy marketing road of an adaptation. The demand by audiences and some critics for people with negative opinions to shut up and let people have fun is not a benign ask. It's a symptom of our current fight with media illiteracy. Media critique being framed as snobbish or elitist is not the feminist take that you think it is, or even a progressive one. It's one that gives people an excuse to not feel bad about enjoying shallow media that might be harmful, which, by the way, is fine. But saying that it's misogynistic to critique Emerald Fennell's work helps no one, not even Fennell herself, even if you mistakenly believe that Fennell is getting treated unfairly compared to her male contemporaries. Maybe she is, but it's not feminist or empowering to say, women don't want complex stories, this is for the girls. Let us enjoy our porn slop, you pearl-clutching prudes. A hilarious take when a huge amount of negative criticism that I've seen of this movie is that it isn't even sexy or freaky enough. People want it to be more porn. This mindset is the obvious downstream consequence of an era plagued by girl math, girl dinner, I'm just a girl trends, allowing women to infantilize themselves and frame it as progressive. All of us need to come to terms with reality right now. In a time of fascism and rising anti-intellectualism, when the powers that be want you to be distracted, stupid, and ignorant, too tired and shallow, and brain fried from reading bad takes on the internet, hey, fighting myself here too, or smart enough to follow what they're up to, it is proactively detrimental to pretend that all rest and all fun is radical. It can be, but it is not a given. Taking one of the most complex and passionate pieces of literature written by a woman and misconstruing it to be a smut-slop trope fest with any of the abrasive and uncomfortable layers stripped away is not feminist. And no, I don't want to excuse it simply because women like it and a woman is the one making it. That is not to say that Wuthering Heights, the movie, has no merits as a piece of art at all. Richard Brody does point out Wuthering Heights potentially heralding a new era of grandiose Hollywood romances, which I am super on board with. He writes for The New Yorker, I'm sympathetic to Fennell's effort because what she really appears to be adapting is less Brontë than a cinematic genre that has more or less fallen into oblivion, the romantic drama. Though mediocre in itself, Wuthering Heights is a kind of placeholder, a symbol of an entire swath of filmmaking that now hardly exists but has been newly brought back to the fore by the ample and ubiquitous archive of streaming. This is what somewhat excites me about this movie. In an era so irony-pilled as we are now, I think many of us yearn for, well, yearning. We miss that earnestness that people used to have and our art used to teach. I'm so tired of TV and movies that try to undercut themselves before the scrutining eyes of joyless, cringe-obsessed netizens. I want more corniness, more commitment to themes and emotion. Old Hollywood films and classic literature impact people so greatly because they were open to being vessels for the most powerful and shameless of human emotions. Such emotion, in modern times, makes us deeply uncomfortable. It's high time to try and reverse the clock on that. It's just that I firmly believe that we can do so without excusing ourselves from using our brains at the same time. Not a one of us needs the visual lobotomy that people are calling this movie. As Melvin R. Watson wrote in 1949 in Wuthering Heights and the Critics, never probably will an interpretation of Wuthering Heights be made which will satisfy all people for all time. For a masterpiece of art has a life all its own, which changes, develops, and unfolds as the generations pass. But the fact that the novel has been read continuously for 100 years, that even those critics who were most repelled by it felt compelled often to justify their sense of repulsion, that a fit few have in various ways made it easier to understand the book as a work of art, and that after a century, such diverse reactions and opinions are still possible, gives the comparison of Wuthering Heights with Shakespeare's dramas some validity. All directors want people to see their vision. They're artists. We're just like that. And I don't blame Emerald for that. It's just that I think had her vision of a somewhat steamy Victorian dark romance been honest about being only marginally based on the book and was truly its own work, new title and all, it would be far less of a controversy. That's the risk you take when you put a movie out into the world. People are allowed to hate it and say so. That doesn't have to change your enjoyment of the film if you loved it, though. Given the fact that people seem to think that no one was hating on Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein a few months ago, but my timelines were full of Frankenstein hate and I posted an almost 1 hour long hate fest on it, a lot of you seriously need to just get better at curating your algorithm. Will we ever get a more faithful Wuthering Heights that actually covers the full book and doesn't whitewash Heathcliff? Because we only have one that didn't do that. Who's to say? But I know one white Heathcliff that I can't bear to condemn. Cliff Richard, you've done it the best it's been done. I salute you.
Wait! Kathy, wait for me!
Thank you for learning with me about Wuthering Heights and Wuthering Heights. I hope this cleared some things up if you were confused and gave you a new perspective. And if you still want to defend this film, well, that's certainly your right. Go ahead and go down to the comments and yell at me. Tell me how much you hate me. Tell me I'm disgusting and you never want to watch my videos again. But make it like 30 comments so it drives my engagement up. We're all entitled to enjoy garbage slop sometimes, as long as we acknowledge it for what it is. There's plenty of garbage slop that I love myself. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. I have some shame. So anyway, don't forget to grab a copy of my graphic novel, Liberated: The Radical Art and Life of Claude Gahan. And until next time, wash thy hands, wear thy mask, and do not let Kathy in your window.